So I know I'm a little late to the party with this one, but I wanted to give this album the dues. I really wanted to dive in and really examine every nook and cranny because I'm not going to bury the lead too much. Believe the hype. Believe the hype of this one. This is an album that you're going to hear a lot of talk about, and I'm sure you already have. This is one of those rare occasions for me where the hype lived up to it. So without further ado, let's just dive into this. The Passing by Jacob Roberge, and I really hope I got your last name right there, Jacob. I think just moving forward, I'm just going to say Jacob rather than Jacob Roberge. Again, I hope I got that. So Jacob is a new player to the scene in terms of this being his debut record. He's done a lot of YouTube stuff and just kind of independent stuff, covers of songs and things like that. He's hailing from my own home country of Canada, but he's over in Quebec. So, we got some of that French-Canadian feel and vibes to this. And yeah, he kind of came onto the scene with this debut record and really took the prog world by storm. I've seen so many reviews and so many people recommending this record with very high praise, and I am just going to be another voice championing this album because, man, this album has the juice. This album has the goods. With all that kind of now behind us in introducing Jacob to the world, we have the debut record, and it is 6 songs across just over an hour's worth of music, and in my mind, it's divided into 2 phases. You have the first phase or the first face, the first side of this record, which is 5 tracks, Long Way Home, Empty Traces Part 1, Garden of Souls, Petrichord, and Empty Traces Part 2. And then you have the second face, the second side of this record, which is the title track, the 32-minute long epic, where other albums kind of fluster with kind of a balance between the two. I feel this album has a fairly strong footing between balancing those shorter tracks and the longer piece. It's still a little unbalanced in my opinion. I want to get the criticisms that I have of this album out of the way first because they are very small. Very, very small, very minimal. The first is that, those first handful of tracks, the first 5 tracks of Long Way Home all the way to Empty Traces Part 2, they're good. They're really, really good tracks. But I would be struggling to say that they are amazing, great, or masterpieces. I still love the way that it opens up with The Long Way Home. It's very driven. It's very punchy. It introduces you to the sounds and the soundscapes of this record. You're hearing influences of past artists and masters. The most notable one that people point to and turn to is Neil Morse, and I will also agree to that. But you also get other contemporary artists, a little bit of Flower Kings, a little bit of Spock's Beard, a little bit of Haken and Dream Theater, all the different modern progressive rock bands, as well as, masters of the past. I'm getting flavors of Yes and Genesis and King Crimson and a little bit of Gentle Giant and, those kind of quirky Emerson, Lake and Palmer feels. It's never a retread. And it's never a complete ripoff, as a lot of these bands and artists tend to have. It's more of a using the techniques, using the styles, and using the flavors of the past in more of a unique and new way. So I really appreciate that. And The Long Way Home really opens it up very well. I'm also reminded of the Deer Hunter or Beardfish, specifically within more of that driven style. This is a track that would fit very well at home on Sleeping in Traffic or Comfort Zone for sure. Empty Traces, I'm going to say Part 1 and Part 2 kind of come together as a 10-minute long suite, kind of divided into 2 pieces. Both of these are great. They're a little bit more subdued, a little bit more intimate in that face, and shows a different side of Jacob, whereas The Long Way Home is a little bit more driven, Empty Traces is a little bit more intimate, it's a little bit more personal in that effect, it's not quite as loud and as bombastic, it's a little bit more subdued in that case. I think my 2 favorite tracks are the 1-2 punch of Garden of Souls, as well as Petrichord. And man, Petrichord really knocked me out. And this also brings me to the biggest criticism that I have of this album on Petrichord. The 10-minute track, the longest track on the first side of this record, ends in a fade out rather than a play out. And Jacob, you got me in that. Just as this massive guitar work and this guitar suite really showcases Jacob's ability to shred the guitar, emote out of the guitar. It's not just the technical chops, which I appreciate and I love. It's that emotion that he's able to pull out of the guitar in the same way that a David Gilmour would. It's got that emotion. It's got that drive. While there still is a little bit of a technical side of things. I'm thinking of like Mike Holmes from IQ is also able to play this very intricate and very poetic verse on the guitar while still maintaining that technical chops and the emotional side of things. Almost like a Steve Hackett would. But just as we're starting to get that juice, just as we're starting to get that meat, it ends on a fade out. And that alone made me angry because I'm like, my guy, my dude, we're getting the good stuff. And you're teasing me. You're teasing me. You're driving right up to the parking lot of the fireworks factory. I'm seeing the fireworks display, but then we're turning around and leaving before I actually get to see the grand finale. That hit, that hurt. But everything leading up to that moment, the build-ups, the payoffs, Jacob is showing how he's a master of this progressive rock art form, because it is a little bit of a tricky beast to thread, because you have to solidify a build-up. You have to be able to prove that this 10-minute track is worth a listener to listen to 10 minutes worth of music. And he's able to pull that off very, very well. All right, that's the criticisms. Let's talk about what I absolutely adore and love and continuously come back to this album for, and that is the title track, the 30-minute long epic of The Passing. Jacob proves the promise that he made within Petrichor onto The Passing within this piece. He's showcasing that, yes, I am able to craft a masterful epic, because I feel like lately, a lot of the big epics that I've heard, even from masters of the genre, haven't been able to deliver a proper epic. Like even the one that we got last year from Neil Morse, the two that we had for No Hill for a Climber, I just felt like they didn't quite meet the assignment properly. And man, Jacob not only met, but exceeded the expectations. It's a brilliant and beautiful and heartfelt concept, the different stages of grief, literally the passing. We're going to get through this. We're going to see it to the other side. So not only do we have a very brilliant and cohesive kind of through line within this, but that also is mimicked within the actual playing styles. He introduces the main theme of this track very early on. We're introduced to it. We kind of get the feel of it. It's a little Beatlesy. It's a little bit Neil Morsey. It's got that, very similar kind of transatlantic feel to it. But then he plays around with it. He reintroduces us to it many times throughout the track. Sometimes in major chords, sometimes in minor chords, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower. And it's that playing style, this more jazzy approach to how these tracks are laid out that I really, really appreciate. Throughout this half hour worth of music, I'm never bored. I'm never looking at my watch. I'm always excited for whatever's coming over the horizon. The playing styles and the build-ups on this. He's able to command the build-ups to plateaus and then a further build-up and a further plateau. We have little dips and valleys that we can get ourselves into that just lead to further building and further payoffs to the final accumulation of this entire album and track that plays with this extremely bombastic and passionate moment. On the first maybe handful of listens, there was a promise, and I knew I was dealing with a really great progressive rock album when I wasn't quite ready for what was being introduced to me. I'm thinking of albums like Tales of Topographic Ocean from Yes, or even Red from King Crimson, where when I first listened to it, I'm like, okay, it didn't wow me right off the get-go, but the more times I spend with it and the more times I listen to it, the more I get out of it. And I feel like The Passing, not only the album, but also the track, is doing that. Every time I listen to it, I get more out of it. The more I listen to it, the more I enjoy it, and the more I just want to restart this all over again and get right back into it. So, yeah, that leads us to my ultimate conundrum, because The Passing, the track, is an absolute masterpiece. This track can live alongside, other masterpieces of this caliber. We're looking at The Truth Will Set You Free from the Flower Kings, Duel with the Devil and Stranger in Your Soul from Transatlantic, even The Whirlwind from Transatlantic, Million Town from Frost Behind Me. A lot of these modern masterpieces within these big epics. The last time I heard an epic that even came close to the masterfulness of this was Myth of the Monstrophist from Ryo Okamoto back 2 years ago. Like, nothing else has come close to being this good. It's just the first side of this record where I'm like, that is a solid 8 to 8.5 out of 10 versus a 10 out of 10, which I'm looking for, which culminates entirely out of a 9.5 out of 10. So part of the reason why I spent so much time with this record is to see if I could give it the masterpiece status, which I desperately want to do. But because there's a few blemishes, there's a few flaws in my mind, I gotta give it the rating, which I'm going to, which ultimately is The Passing by Jacob Roberge is an album I absolutely love with my whole heart. And honestly, that is such a compliment to a first-time artist. Coming out of the gates with a near-perfect record is extremely difficult. This is one of the best records I've heard within the first half of this decade. You know, like this is just on par with I Have Little to No Memories of These Memories from Michael Mills. It's just as good as pretty much all the masters that came before it. I've been listening to this record more than the Dream Theater record that came out a couple weeks ago. That's how good this record is. So just because it doesn't get my full 10 out of 10 masterpiece status does not mean that this album isn't qualified for that. You know, it's just, I think Jacob has it in his caliber to put out a full masterpiece. And I think I'm really hoping that next album is. So that's what I've got for The Passing. It definitely gets the note seal of approval. You know, this one is a run, don't walk to go and listen to. If you haven't listened to it already, immediately go and listen to this. I beg you to go and listen to this record because it really is that good. So I think that's where I want to leave it for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I want to thank Jacob for such amazing music. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man, because this is just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic and well done. So yeah, once again, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.